Hello and welcome to Harshmeet Study Circle. We just celebrated our Republic Day with grand celebrations. As always, there were many highlights in the Republic Day parade. One of the most important takeaways was the chief guest. The chief guest in this year's Republic Day parade was the President of Indonesia. Just like in 1950, when we celebrated the Republic Day, the chief guest was the Indonesian President. Thus, it is a good time to look into India's relationship with Indonesia. It's a country that we don't talk a lot about. We are fascinated with our neighboring countries, so we don't really pay a lot of attention towards countries that are slightly far off. But Indonesia is an extremely important country, has always been an important country. And that is why in this session, which is relevant for international relations, GS2 and your PSIR optional, we will be focusing on India-Indonesia relationship, history of the relation, what exactly is the present status, and where do we see the two countries going together. Also, as you know, I am right now running the question marathon, which is a crash course for Prelims 2025. Two videos are already out, both are on Indian polity. The third video will be on ancient history, that will be on tomorrow at 10 a.m. Do watch that as well. This entire series will have over 40 classes. First 5 free for all on YouTube right here, and then we will shift to my app called Harshmeet Study Circle, where you can attend the other classes, the remaining ones. The objective is to cover all these subjects in the prelims exam and have at least 1,000 questions of the level of the prelims exam. At the end of the program, we will also have 5 full-length mock tests. You will be able to get PDFs of all these classes. You can register for this by downloading my app. The fees for the program is 2,000 rupees if you register till 6th of February. 6th of February is the date that the classes start on my app. After that, if you register, the course will be 2,500. If you have any questions, I have left my WhatsApp number and my email ID in the description of the video. Now let's come back to what we are here to discuss today. As I said, chief guest of the Republic Day parade this year was the Indonesian president. Now, Indonesia is a very unique country with a lot of historical ties that India has. A lot of South Indian dynasties in India, time to time, the ones that were naval powers, had a direct relationship with the ruling dynasties in Indonesia. Not just this, you will still find a lot of very important historical monuments in Indonesia that are relevant to us. For example, one of the most famous monuments in Indonesia is the Prambanan temples. Now, this temple specifically shows the influence of Ramayana and Mahabharata in Indonesian culture. Interestingly, a lot of names in Indonesia that you will see of common people are similar to names that you would find in India that have a Hindu connotation. There has been, as I said, relationship between the two sides of trade, relationship of culture, relationship of religion also from many centuries between the two countries. The temple that I was talking about is called the Prambanan temple compound. Now, as you can see, it's a set of multiple temples all together. This is a photo of that temple compound. Just a side note, that is just some important piece of information about this temple specifically. It is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. It is the largest Hindu temple site in Indonesia and the second largest in Southeast Asia. The biggest one being in Angkor Wat. Tell me in the comment section, by the way, Angkor Wat is in which country? Not a difficult question, most of you would know this, but do tell me in the comment section where exactly is this one. Now, this temple has about 240 temple structures, which again tell the relationship between the Hindu culture in India and the Hindu culture in Indonesia. Now, there are multiple stories, multiple accounts about who built this temple, when was it built, but it's a general consensus that Indonesia in the past has been ruled by some dynasties that followed Buddhism and some dynasties that followed Hinduism. Now, this temple apparently is said to be started by Rakai Pikatan and then his successor, that was King Lokpal. The construction of this temple was a way for the Hindu dynasty now to show its growing influence over and above the Buddhist dynasties that had been ruling over Java and the nearby areas. So it's seen as a mark of dominance by the Hindu dynasty in the time to come, specifically the Hindu Sanjay dynasty that came to power in central Java after a century long rule of the Buddhist Shailendra dynasty. So this is the history of that temple. Now let's come back to India-Indonesia. Now, from the colonial era itself, the relationship between the two sides has been extremely close. Just like we were ruled by the British, Indonesia was controlled by the Dutch. The Dutch really wanted the spices from Indonesia, and that is why they controlled over this area. We had many big leaders. Similarly, their independence struggle also had many big leaders. The most famous name of them was Sukarno. So Sukarno, who later on became the Indonesian president as well, was the biggest name in their freedom struggle. Sukarno and Jawaharlal Nehru had a very important and a close relationship between the two. This is the photo. This is Jawaharlal Nehru. This is Sukarno, Indira Gandhi, and the children of Sukarno. So it's a very warm relationship between the two. And I'll just tell you some interesting facts so that you can understand how close a relationship was between the two sides. In 1947, Asian Relationship Conference was held in Delhi. Please understand, this was the time that Nehru had decided that India will not join US or USSR. Rather, we will make something called non-aligned movement, and we want other countries also to support us. Now, please understand, 1947, Indonesia had not got independence. So, till 1947, Indonesia was still under the Dutch rule. So, there was no official ruler from Indonesia. Even then, Jawaharlal Nehru, who organized this conference, invited Sukarno to represent Indonesia. Now, that was a big thing, because you invite someone who is not in the government means you are then giving your support to the independence of Indonesia. So India supported Indonesia's independence even before their independence, and that played a major role in strengthening the relationship between the two sides. Indonesia, as I said, was still under the Dutch control, but Sukarno did represent Indonesia in this 1947 Asia Relationship Conference. That led to Indonesia becoming one of the founding members of NAM as well. That is the non-aligned movement later on. Sukarno, in fact, openly said that Nehru was like a big brother figure to him. Means, initially the two big leaders of the two countries were extremely close to each other because of the help that we had given to them. In non-aligned movement, the two countries became the founding members. They collaborated at the Bandung Conference in 1955. That led to the seeds of non-aligned movement sown, that led to non-aligned movement coming up as a third front in world politics. So everything started very well in between the two sides. Now, I also want to tell you a very interesting story, a story that has been lost in history unfortunately, but everyone should know. You all would have heard the name Biju Patnaik. Especially if you're from Odisha, you would know Biju Patnaik. If not, then Naveen Patnaik, who till recently was the Chief Minister of Odisha, his father Biju Patnaik, very, very well-known politician, also the Chief Minister of Odisha multiple times. He was a very interesting personality. Now, he has a special connection with Indonesia, specifically Indonesia's independence. Now, it looks like a thriller story, but this is all reality. Now, understand, Biju Patnaik was also an aviator. Aviator means a pilot who used to take up projects, very exciting projects from time to time. Now, imagine this, 1940s end, Indonesia fighting for its independence against the Dutch. So Dutch had controlled the communication in Indonesia. They controlled who can come to Indonesia, who can leave Indonesia. At that time, Indonesia wanted India's help, and they wanted their big leaders to be secured so that they are not arrested by the Dutch government. They wanted the big leaders to go out of the country. Now what happens? Nehru, who was close to Biju Patnaik, he gave Biju Patnaik an assignment. The assignment was, you take your plane, and again it's like a thriller story. You take your plane, go to Indonesia and save their big leaders without the Dutch stopping you, bring them to India. Now that was an assignment that was taken up by Biju Patnaik. And just to add to that, by the way, Biju Patnaik was not alone. Biju Patnaik took his wife as a co-pilot. So the couple on this trip, they went to Indonesia on this secret mission. They flew to Java on a very small airstrip in Java, evading Dutch air patrol just to take out the big leaders of Indonesia. And the big leaders at that time was Sukarno, obviously, Muhammad Hatta, and also Sultan Jaharir. Now, Sultan Jaharir was a former Prime Minister of Indonesia. He and many of the important associates of Sukarno were rescued by Biju Patnaik, and Biju Patnaik brought them to India on his plane. So much was the bravery of Biju Patnaik that even today Biju Patnaik is a very well-known figure in Indonesia. Biju Patnaik, in fact, was given the title Bhumi Putra, which is the highest honor a foreigner can get from the Indonesian government. In fact, Sukarno's daughter is named Meghavati, that is the daughter of the clouds, and this name was also, it is said, given by Biju Patnaik. Meghavati herself has accepted that in many interviews that her name was actually given by Biju Patnaik. So understand the relationship between the two sides, especially Indonesia and Biju Patnaik. With that storytelling over, let's come back to where we were. Now, the two sides also have a strong strategic partnership. It's in the interest of the two countries to collaborate with each other. We have a common adversary. I don't want to use the word enemy, but we have a common adversary in China. China has a South China Sea dispute with Indonesia. They also have a trade dispute with Indonesia, and Indonesia looks towards India for help. There is joint defense collaboration between the two sides. We have joint military exercises called Samudra Shakti. Now, Indonesia being an island country, for them Navy is the most important component of their armed forces. So for them, naval exercises matter the most. In fact, the Indonesian president who is in India just signed a BrahMos missile agreement also with India, which is a big boost for Indian defense as well. A 3,800 crore deal has just been signed yesterday between India and Indonesia about the BrahMos missile. Remember, India has already exported BrahMos missile to Philippines. So this is another of the ASEAN countries to which we are exporting our BrahMos missile, which is a big achievement for India, something that will not go well with China. India also has and considered Indonesia an integral part of our Act East policy. Act East policy, as you know, focuses on ASEAN, and Indonesia is an integral part of ASEAN. Both the countries have time and time again spoken up about ensuring freedom of navigation, about ensuring that South China Sea is not a disputed area, and China does not pressurize other countries to move out of it. This is where India also has to play an important role in supporting Indonesia. Let's come to money matters now. What about the economic engagement? Now, we do have good trade. If you look at the ASEAN countries, for example, India's largest trade is with Singapore. Second largest amongst the ASEAN countries is Indonesia. So Indonesia-India trade is pretty big. The problem for India is that the trade imbalance is against India. So we import a lot of stuff from Indonesia. The biggest import from Indonesia that India does is coal and palm oil. Now, India imports oil, but if I tell you this statement, India imports a lot of oil, your first reaction is, yes, India imports a lot of crude oil. But apart from crude oil, the cooking oil also is a big part of our import. So we import a lot of cooking oil from Malaysia, Indonesia, because of which the trade imbalance is not in our favor. From April 2022 to March 2023, the bilateral trade reached $38.8 billion, which is a fair number. But again, the problem is that the import that we have, coal, palm oil, rubber, is much more than our exports. The things that we export to Indonesia include pharmaceuticals, automotive components, etc. So we have to get that in order. So as you can see, out of the total trade component, 37.5% is our export to Indonesia, while remaining 62.5% is the import coming in from Indonesia. Maybe this BrahMos missile deal will slightly move the scale, but it will still not be enough to have a balance between the two. Now, many other companies in India, private entities like Adani, Tata, etc., have invested a lot in infrastructure building in Indonesia. See, the developing countries present a good opportunity for the private sector because they get a good return. When you invest money in the developed countries, there is not much of a return because return is directly proportional to the risk that you have. So if you invest money in developing countries, least developed country, you would have a risk of return, but you would get good returns. On the other hand, if you invest money in America, Europe, it's a stable economy, so stable return, but nothing out of the extraordinary. The two countries also have a lot of people-to-people ties. Indonesia earns a lot of money in the form of tourism. Bali, for example, is one of the preferred destinations of people looking to travel to places without spending a lot of money. So India also sends a lot of tourists to Indonesia. Also, Indonesian culture, specifically in Bali, is a lot like Hindu culture, which is something that is in common for a lot of Indians moving from here to there. There are festivals like Diwali, Ramayan, which has performances in Indonesia, and then there are celebrations of festivals such as Eid in India. So Indonesia is a hugely Muslim majority country. So their celebrations also happen in India, which is again a common thread between the two sides going forward. There are significant Indian diaspora also in Indonesia, means a lot of Indian origin people live in Indonesia, which is true with most parts of the world anyway. But in Southeast Asia specifically, we do have a significant presence. With that, the relationship again improves for the better. India, on the other hand, has also included India in our ITEC program. For those of you who don't know, let me just give you a brief note about what ITEC is. So, since 1960s rather, Indian government has been running a program called Indian Technical and Economic Cooperation, called ITEC, under which we help poor countries or countries that are at par with us by giving them scholarships, research, helping them set up certain infrastructure. Most of this money goes to African countries, but some of this money goes to Asian countries as well. This is what the ITEC is. So it started in 1964 and it is run by Ministry of External Affairs. This is mainly to improve our outreach to other countries so that they have a good image of India in their mind, and India also tries to bring them to our side in international affairs. It's our initiation, or it's our initiative to promote South-South cooperation, means cooperation with other developing countries. We offer cooperation to over 160 countries under this, most of them in Asia and Africa, some in Latin America, Caribbean and Pacific Islands as well. So the areas where we help the other countries include IT, finance, rural development, etc., renewable energy. So we share our technology with them. For example, our farmers go to their countries to train their farmers of how to get the most out of the agriculture. Many of the students are offered scholarships in India. Many of the, for example, let's say IGNU, these kind of universities open up their campuses in other countries to offer them education. All these things are done under ITEC. India has built infrastructure like solar electrification, IT parks also in many countries. Some of this money has gone to Indonesia as well. Till now, whatever we have studied seems all good between the two sides. But obviously there are certain challenges. No relationship can be without any challenge in between the two countries. So first big challenge, as we discussed, the trade imbalance is against India. And the more we continue to import vegetable oil, palm oil, coal, the more the trade imbalance will always be against us. Now, while we can't stop this import, what we can do is we can export more stuff. So we have been demanding that our pharmaceutical industry should get better access to ASEAN countries, including Indonesia, but that remains to be seen. Influence of China is a big concern. See, Indonesia looks at India, rather all the ASEAN countries look toward India to have a balance against China. But India doesn't want to be that assertive. We don't want to openly confront China because we have our own ongoing issues. So that remains an irritant. The other countries expect India to balance out China, but India is not that keen on doing that. The environmental concerns, palm oil production has an impact. They have to cut down a lot of trees, because of which Indonesia has been facing climate change issues in the long run. And then they also have the South China Sea dispute, where India has supported their stand. But the problem is, again, we don't want to take China head on this issue. So while the ASEAN countries like Indonesia want us to come and support them against China, we do that, but mostly on paper and lip service to be true. But we don't really come and take their side to be confrontational against China. Now, India and Indonesia have a lot of things in common. A lot common history, common culture, a lot of things that we agree on, which is why India and Indonesia together can also play an important role at the world stage. Both the countries are members of multiple groups together like ASEAN, East Asia Summits, IORA, G20, etc. And we do see eye to eye on most of the issues. This is where the two countries can collaborate better going forward, making sure that our interests converge at the world stage going ahead so that we can help each other. This is what brings us to the end of our session. I hope it was a good refresher for all of you in case you have studied earlier about India and Indonesia relationship. If not, this will be a wholesome lesson in India-Indonesia relationship. If you want the PDF of this lecture, you can join my Telegram channel. The link is in the description of the video. I'll share the PDF there. Also, do consider joining the Question Marathon Prelims 2025. The next session of Ancient History is coming tomorrow at 10 a.m. If you're new here, do hit the subscribe button. Thank you so much. Bye-bye. Jai Hind.